everybody has their cameras on as we're doing this class so that we can go in this sacred space together to do this. And there is a reason for that, you know, so I wouldn't necessarily take it personally. It's just the type of class that this is and the nature of this class. That's why I'm doing that. And so that is enough about me. Of course, I have all that information down in the description, y'all, as usual, as well as the information to my next podcast guest. Today's guest is going to be Kiara Norwood, and she is definitely qualified. She's a spiritual coach. She's also the CEO of Energetically Aligned Healing. Energetically Aligned Healing is a holistic wellness platform that empowers women to heal and embody their divine feminine. She draws her strength and her guidance from her deep connection to her ancestors. She integrates ancestral wisdom with her expertise as a clinical mental health counselor, as well as being certified as a certified clinical trauma professional. So she blends alternative medicine, energy healing, and mental health practices to guide women in transforming stress and burnout into balance and vitality. Now, she's driven to do this by her own spiritual healing journey and an unwavering dedication to authenticity. So, Kiara is committed to revolutionizing how women approach their wellness and inspire healing communities within their communities, healing within their communities. So, definitely, since it's qualified, she's doing the work. I saw her on Instagram or Threads, I believe, and she's definitely out there. She's having ancestral veneration classes. She's always talking about how to heal the divine feminine. She has lots more credentials as well, so you could definitely check her website out. That'll be down in the description. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So thank you so much, Kiara. I am so happy that you decided to do this podcast episode with me. I really got excited when I saw you out there on social media doing damn near everything that I do. So I'm like, this is my sister. My sister's spirit has to be. And so,
Mhm,
you know, you're into African ancestral spirituality, Reiki
mhm,
healing, herbalism,
mhm,
mental health awareness and health, you know. So
mhm.
tell me like how the journey started for you. Like what brought all this about for you?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, first, I did actually start as a trauma therapist. And so I got into that field with the, I guess, passion of helping Black women, heal through trauma. Like I had been doing my own therapy and like really looking at, what it looked like to find somebody that identified with my experience, that knew how to navigate the concerns I had and was having trouble doing so. So I started as a trauma therapist. I decided to go into the field for that reason. From doing that work, though, I then noticed that Black women, but women in general as well, just seemed like they needed additional healing modalities that catered to their experience and that helped them to establish holistic well-being. I had additional trauma training and things, but still was noticing that I would get clients to a space of stabilization, and so they would be like, maybe having less flashbacks, able to understand their experience, able to speak their truth. But when it came time to actually build a fulfilling life, there was a breakdown. And so it all seemed like it would come back to this trauma. And so essentially, then it began to look like building a life around the trauma. And I was like, man, like there's got to be something more than this. Like, I want more for us. Like, mental and emotional well-being shouldn't just feel like you're managing symptoms. Like, it should be like you're actually able to live and thrive. And so I
Right.
started looking at other modalities for healing. So I started seeing a Reiki practitioner that was in, my neighborhood and, trying to holistically integrate all of these different practices for myself to the best of my ability. And just really started researching like what are some alternative methods that have been proven beneficial for trauma and what are some things that, we used to do, for us as like, as a background in our ancestry and things like for healing. And so came across all these different books and really was seeking wisdom from all of these different Black authors, Black female authors. And then I was like, okay, I feel like this is cool. Like, I don't really know what I'm going to do with it, but I feel like this is awesome. And then I
Right.
actually ended up having a health crisis myself. And so I was like, oh, this is what I was going to do with this. So I then used all of the healing modalities I had been researching, like went to practitioners of them and found a lot of progress for myself in a very short amount of time. And I was like, wow. So that plus a lot of other things happening because that health crisis was kind of intense. Like I ended up, like physically hospitalized, and it was like so many things that happened. And I just felt like the traditional systems of mental and physical wellness were really failing me at that point. So
Mm.
being able to utilize these methods that I had been researching really felt like it was my ancestors showing up for me, right on time. And so after that, I was like, I really feel like I want to pivot. So there was a lot of other things that happened in between that time, but I think that was the biggest catalyst. And I was like, okay, I think I need to navigate a career pivot. So then I got trained and certified in all of those modalities that were helpful to me, and then opened this business. So,
Amazing. I love it. And you know what? I love the journey.
mhm,
And I love how your ancestors were working with you. You can just
mhm,
this is how it goes. People are always like, how do I get in touch with my ancestors? What do I do? First and foremost, once you become a seeker, you are
mhm,
opening that portal where you become
mhm,
more connected to them. They're gonna
mhm,
assist you, they're gonna guide you, and you're gonna get to a place where
mhm,
y'all are tight. You
mhm,
trust them, you listen to them, and they're
mhm,
guiding you, and that is it. It's not something you can tell somebody. It's not necessarily something in a book. It has to
mhm,
be experienced, and the way that
mhm,
you describe that is beautiful. Like, if I, and then of course it was there for you when you experienced your own trauma. So
mhm,
what I also hear out of that is the healer's journey.
mhm,
How we become better healers is by going through our own trauma, our own crises, and then
mhm,
we are able to better help other people who are in the same space. So that's amazing. So how long have
mhm,
you been doing this? Like, how long were you a trauma therapist? Like,
mhm,
to well, I think the name of your business is Energetically Aligned Healing,
mhm.
correct? Okay,
So
good,
I
good.
was,
Yeah.
yes, I think there's a little bit of a lag. So my apologies.
No
Uh,
worries. Yeah, okay.
but I was a trauma therapist. I owned and operated a private practice for 3 years that specialized in PTSD. And then this business is about 2.5 years old now, I believe. So yeah, so
Okay.
that's how long I've been doing it for now.
Yeah, so you've got some experience, you've got enough experience, especially in seeing the mental health aspect of it first. And I love that too, because I always tell people if you're able to do the both, that's awesome. And that's how my journey started, as I was with a therapist who I'm
Mm,
just grateful that I worked with people who thought about alternative ways of healing. So she was like,
mm,
try meditation, try yoga.
mm,
She
mhm,
probably was
mhm,
going outside of her scope. I don't know, but
mhm,
I
mhm,
really appreciated it because it opened that door for me and it allowed me to be that seeker like you described. And then I went and started
mhm,
going to grab these different things. Amazing. So tell me about your Reiki healing journey. I like to start there because I know
mhm.
most of us as facilitators of healing, almost damn near all of us then started with Reiki. So like tell me how that came about and what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, so actually, it was interesting. So after I was getting Reiki from a person that was nearby to me, I kind of just started looking into what it would look like to get certified, but didn't really pursue it. And then after I had the crises, I looked a little bit more and still was like, because at the time I was living in Indiana. And so, like, finding people that I felt like I actually wanted to learn under, like, I knew I wanted
Mhm.
to learn under somebody that was Black or, Native Indigenous in some way, but I wanted a specific type of teacher. And I was having a really difficult time finding that, where I was at. So then I ended up moving back to Chicago for a short stint and then came across a Native Indigenous elder that was teaching the Reiki course and literally was just like, this is interesting. Like, look at her credentials. Like, she was like, around 70 years old, had been doing it for decades, like, had a lot of acclaim, like, had been teaching hospitals and things out in Chicago. And I was like, I just really felt like I could learn a lot, like from this elder. And so I just reached out just to see what would happen. And they were like, you honestly reached out just in time. And like, we usually just due to, the space that they had and like the way that they navigate the cohort sizes, they usually only have like about 15 people, per cohort. And she was like, we have maybe 2 spots left. And she was like, I literally just had somebody else call me. So she was like, if you're really wanting to do this, like, I really think that you should. She was like, the fact that you're interested in this, like, I think that this is, something that you should move so forward and pursue. And so I didn't even really know necessarily what I was getting myself into, to be completely honest. Like, I had had Reiki before, but even the woman that I got Reiki from, she was also a massage therapist. So it's not
Mhm.
like she really had much time to explain it. I would get like half of a massage and like half of Reiki or something. So I really didn't know, but I was like, I loved how I felt afterwards. She was able to tell me a lot about myself and like relay it to me in spiritual terminology. And so I was able to use the Reiki and the massages that I had been getting at the time to essentially like kind of benchmark some of the progress that I had been working towards. So like if she would be like, oh, like, your heart chakra is clear today. And like, I'm not noticing as much in your solar plexus. And I'm like, see, I've been working on those things. So like,
Yeah.
I'm glad to, so I was excited just about the prospect of learning. Ended up taking this course. It was 3 weekends, like kind of back to back to back. And we're like learning under this native elder. And it just opened my eyes to so much. And one of the experiences that I remember happening really vividly, I think it was either the second or the third weekend. So it's around the time because you get partners and you start like learning how to kind of practice on
Mhm.
your partners. And so around that time, and I was just like really emotionally upset about something. And I remember my partner being like, you don't have anything like at this time that's physically going on with you that I'm picking up on. But she was like, emotionally, like it seems like you're really bothered. She's like, I'll go and I'll clear this space. And then I feel like this energy just comes right back. And so her response to that was then to call in some of my ancestors. And so I'll
Mm.
never forget like my grandmother actually showing up to me. That was the first time I had had an experience like that.
Yes.
Like I had heard her before, but we just assumed kind of like, I had a close relationship with her, so I was just assuming that I was remembering things in the way that she would have taught me or the things that
Mhm.
she would have said. Like it never really dawned on me, that clairaudience could have been something that I was, experiencing. I was kind of just like I had a close relationship with her. So I navigate through her voice in that
Mhm.
way. But when she showed up to me, during that session. And it was the wildest thing because I mean, I'm laying there with my eyes closed, but I'm literally like seeing her. And it was the wildest experience. Like I remember like touching her, like because she had had a lot of trauma and things, from her life, and just the way that she died was very traumatic. She had had a lot of health concerns. And so like seeing her in this version, like I just remember thinking like she looked beautiful. Like I was like touching her face and, being like, like, Granny, is this like really you? And, her just telling me, I got you. Like everything's
Mm.
okay. Like I'm not going to be able to stay here for long, but know that I'm always here, and I got you. And I remember I cried like the rest of
Yeah.
like that. Like it was like people didn't understand what was happening because there was like a mix of us in the class, right? So all the people of color in the class were having these profound experiences with this. And then like some of the non-people of color, while they were having experience, they were kind of just like, oh, like I feel calm,
Right.
like that type of thing. But like I was like bawling, like I had to excuse myself, like go to the bathroom because it was just wild for me.
Mhm.
And I couldn't. And so from there, I was like, oh, like I knew it was real at that point, but like that, I think really solidified to me the experience in which I was having. And then when you go through, because, with Reiki, there are, ceremonies essentially that you have to kind of like navigate. So even then, I felt the presence of my ancestors too. And that was prior to my grandmother showing up. So I was like, what is this that I'm feeling?
Yes.
And I would notice that like all the other people, whether they were Black people of color or just other people of color, were having these same really profound experiences of being in touch with their ancestors. So that would be probably the most pivotal thing that happened to me in the Reiki journey, as well as just becoming more aware of my spiritual gifts in general,
Yes.
I would say. And then it kind of like took off from there.
Wow, that's a phenomenal story. And clearly your ancestors were like, okay, this is our representative. And I
Mhm.
like how it was your grandmother. I tell people that all the time when they get
Mhm.
nervous about connecting with their ancestors, is always the representative. For me, it was my great grandmother. That was the one I was the closest
Mhm.
with. That's the one I
Mhm.
always remembered. And she was my first,
Mhm.
because you're going to trust that one.
Mhm.
So I think that's beautiful. And when I hear your journey and how rooted you are and connected to your ancestors and how involved they are in your growth and development, I have to ask, like, did you grow up like that? Like, were you raised with that type of, but it just awesome. I love it. So yeah,
um
tell me about that a little bit, how that was for you growing up.
Actually, so I grew up in a very I wouldn't say politically conservative Christian household, but very maybe the word would be like more traditional.
Yeah.
Like while we didn't necessarily adhere to a denomination, like the churches and things that we would go to would have like elements of like Baptist and
Mm-hmm.
Pentecostal. And like, so there were very much like these very kind of rigid views
Mm-hmm.
of like what Christianity is supposed to look like and like how it's supposed to be navigated. And really any decision to not participate in that was not supported very well. So I came
Yeah.
out of that, having gotten involved in, campus organizations and like helping to launch different, spiritual organizations with like, I guess like a Christian orientation on different like college campuses and things, but just like really kind of knee deep in these things. And then eventually got to a point where I was like, why doesn't this feel like this is serving me? I think I was like maybe around like the time when I was in graduate school and had been going to a church of a person that like I really trusted that had been like a really big like mentor in my life and things. And he was under like a umbrella church, and the church was not the like the big church, was not designed or ran by Black or other people of color at all. So the viewpoints that they had about different like doctrine and theology really didn't speak to the Black person's experience. So there would be concerns where they were saying like women couldn't preach. So like I remember like
Mm.
being, scheduled to like pray, in front of the congregation and things, but me having all this wisdom and things being told that, like me and my friends like weren't allowed to preach things or they were really anti-LGBTQ, and that really started to bother me. And then even the things that they would let women participate in, I got really kind of frustrated with hearing that women were, supposed to be, and it was God's design for them to just have to be submissive to men
Mm.
in a spiritual context and in a relational context. I think if people choose to do that, then that's definitely their prerogative. And for whatever reason they choose to, that's amazing. But I don't think that your eternity is dependent on if you
Just
do this,
all I'm
or
thinking
not.
is that sounds like a man's rule. That sounds like a man's law.
Exactly.
Like that doesn't sound like
Exactly.
anything that great spirit of the universe would petty theyself with. Like that's
Exactly.
like so like somebody made that up.
And I
And I
was
was that
just
type of kid.
so it was frustrating. Like you grew up in this household, that does this, and then you kind of get involved in this tradition that's even more strict with it. So as you're trying to explore things like dating, relationships, things like that for yourself, you start having difficulty. So I remember being like, I feel like at minimum, I need to go be under like some type of female preacher or something. Like I need to hear their perspectives and their interpretations of things. In the area that I was in at the time, there was only a white woman that was available. And then we got hit with COVID. So then there was like a complete like lockdown. And so I was like, oh, like I'm gonna have to really start studying, which I didn't mind because I had already been really looking for like Black female theologians. And so from that, because of like womanist theology and how that, integrates so many different vantage points and things, because that's like the Black woman's sphere often of like theology, but also the way that we process societal issues and things. I remember getting out of nowhere turned towards like African spirituality. I brought Goddesses, Orishas, and Voodoo Queens by
Mm-hmm.
Dorsey, and like didn't recognize, the depth of what I actually had in my hand at that point, but really was just like, oh, like they're relating all of these practices that we do on a regular basis to like our origins and our African spirituality. Then I got
Yes.
to learn that all the female goddesses and things like
Mm.
this. So just off of a basis of having the knowledge, that kind of like changed things for me. And that was actually prior to the health crisis. So my eyes were already kind of open to these things. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I can go back to that church. So I just
Yeah.
kind of like
You know
spent
too much
time.
now.
Exactly.
And not to mention it's much more expansive outside of the building and the block structure. But I love how you went on your journey,
Mhm,
and I truly believe that that part of the journey was necessary. So you got your fix of that and was like, yeah, we definitely don't want to do this. And
mhm,
that was my experience too. It was a very strict religious household, and it was like, no, you just don't even talk about this stuff because what are
mhm,
you doing even thinking about that kind of stuff? And as
mhm,
I had to to wait. I call
Yeah.
it doing my time. I did my time. I turned to
Yes.
18 and I got up out of there. And one thing I never did was I never got baptized. I just,
Mhm.
something within inside of me would not allow me to dedicate my life to that. So to me,
Mhm.
that was a serious step. And I
Mhm.
don't know how I knew not to do that for me. But yeah, definitely once I started exploring and expanding, I
Mhm.
love how you kind of jumped into your African spirituality. For
Mhm.
me, because I'm probably a little bit older than you, I started when New Age was all you could find. And so it
Mm.
was the same thing that you're talking about. I'm sitting in this and I'm like one of the only, and I'm having these experiences. Okay.
Yeah.
And can't nobody help me or understand
Mhm.
what's wrong with me. They looking at me like, why is she just acting like this and just taking it so intensely? But
Mhm.
I recognize today it's because they couldn't, they
Mhm.
weren't supposed to.
Mhm.
But eventually, like you, I heard the call to be more connected to African spirituality.
Mhm.
So I'm definitely excited to get into that. Like, talk about that journey. Like I know it started with the book, and that's a
Mhm.
powerful book.
Mhm.
So what was that like for you once you finally got to the other side and conscious about what you were doing?
I remember being very emotional because I can remember, being in class and like even in college and things, like learning about like world religion and stuff and them only having like maybe folk stories. But whenever you get to talking about, different religions and things, people predominantly discuss, Greek mythology,
Mm,
Roman mythology. So I
yes.
didn't even know that these things existed. So it also made me very emotional. I
Hmm.
remember because I was like, I can see myself reflected, in these experiences and feel like, why wasn't this knowledge that I had my whole life? Like, even if it wasn't something that I wanted to adhere to, I remember thinking, it would have been great to know. As
Hmm.
opposed to like feeling like I have to fit my life into this box of this, spiritual practice at this time that didn't feel like it was helping or really serving me. And so I remembered that really like the grief. I
Yeah.
remember that really, really heavily. But then also too, in some ways, kind of trying to take my time because of that background, So I remember being really drawn to like buying my first card deck. And I remember I did not touch that card deck. Like I kept going back to it. And then I was drawn to buy it. And like I sat it at like the altar that I had at the time and like literally just did not touch it. Like I was like, I'm not trying to move too fast. I was like, I
Hmm.
feel like my ancestors are gonna guide me on how I need to navigate this, like the direction in which I need to move. Like I literally was like, and then eventually, like I just was like, oh, okay, like I feel like I can do this. So like I opened it and began to like navigate through the cards and things, like everything I did, I feel like was very like I'm not trying to move too quickly, like I'm not trying to be pushed too much, like like I'm gonna, kind of keep things kind of calm and easy and let them flow. But that's how I would describe things kind of transition. It just kind of gradually continued to happen. It was really interesting. It was like I would be like, okay, like kind of y'all show me how I'm supposed to use this or what I'm supposed to
Right.
do. And then a door would kind of open, and then
Right.
I would kind of walk through that one and it would just continue that way.
And I love that too. And I think that's also important for people who are because there's a lot of fear surrounding connecting with our ancestors based on what we just described. When you go from knowing one thing and now you know nothing about this. So a person, and then on top of that, it's not going to be an individual to guide you. You're going to have to
Mm-hmm.
tune into your spirit realm
Mm-hmm.
and really connect on that level. And we haven't been taught to do that. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times people have a lot of fear about, oh, well, if I do this, something bad's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I like how you discuss that. And when you were ready, your ancestors gave you a little bit. They
Mm-hmm.
spoon fed you a little bit and a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and each person's different with that. It's
Mm-hmm.
nothing to be afraid of. Like our ancestors are going to come in and take over and start living the
Mm-hmm.
life for us. And so
Mm-hmm.
I love hearing how you said for me, it had to be slow, and I remember those times too because I
Mm-hmm.
really felt alone. I knew I had them, but I
Mm-hmm.
was like, is somebody going to teach me? Is somebody going to show me?
Yeah.
And they always were like, you got everything you need inside of you. And that simple
Mm-hmm.
statement, I was like, that was almost like too much power, too much willpower. Like I'm supposed to
Mm-hmm.
have somebody show me. And sure, I had teachers and mentors along the way, but like I said before, I never was supposed to be in some sort of church-like structure or too
Mm-hmm.
community-based. My
Mm-hmm.
walk was always supposed to be between me and them.
Yeah.
And it took what it took. It took some time for me too. There was definitely some stuff I jumped in head first, didn't know what I was
Mm-hmm.
doing, and some stuff I would, waited a long time. So, but I love that for you, that you, like you said, I waited, and then I was like, okay, I'm ready. And then they were like, okay, here's a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so hopefully that helps somebody to know that you don't have to be afraid. It's not any,
Mm-hmm.
nothing gonna come jumping from outside of the under the bed in the closet, and it's not like the TV. Like, my God, like
Mm-mm.
they, the
Mm-mm.
way that they the way that they depicted on these movies, with all these horror movies going on, they're working in overtime to keep people from ever trying to connect with the spirit realm. Like, it's like, I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
y'all messing with, but that's never been the case for me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
yeah, so and I also tell people that if you are thinking about getting in, and the spiritual side of things and dimensional realities of things, you want to have your ancestors, you know, they are your first line of defense. Okay. They are going to
Always.
protect you. And if you don't know who they are, and you out here trying to mess around with some witches and sorcery, and,
Mm-hmm.
buying stuff you see on Instagram, then you
Mm-hmm.
could have some horror movie experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So good. We're talking about safe,
Yes.
safe ways of making that connection with our ancestors. So awesome. I love that. So did you practice any specific types of African spirituality, or did
Mhm.
you go like self-study on it, or how was that for you?
For me, I started off with ancestral spirituality and just really started off by trying to acknowledge them. Like it took me a while to even create an altar. Like when I'm like I was moving, well, I guess like slow. Like I was very much like I don't. So it started off like how can I honor them? Like maybe I can make dishes that I knew that like my grandmother liked, or like like be intentional with thanking her or telling her story, saying her name, and then from there, like I just naturally started to create the altar. From there, then they kind of revealed to me through like different signs and symbolism and things, some of like our ancestral practices and how I needed to connect with them. And even that, I kind of was like, what is happening here? You kind of get bombarded,
Yeah.
with all of these different things. And then you get kind of like, people get kind of placed in your arena to kind of like help you, just so you have an understanding of, okay, this is, what you're kind of being called to practice and things. And then from
Mhm.
there, you kind of just continue in that
Yes.
vein. But it started with ancestral reverence for me, and
Yes.
then going from there, which is honestly, like you said, the foundation of every African spiritual practice, anyways, whether it's more general or more specific of a
Yeah.
practice. So,
Absolutely. And the journey is meant to be an individual journey. I think
mm-hmm,
that's something we also have to disconnect ourselves with the whole
mm-hmm,
church
mm-hmm,
community structure. Everybody's having their own spiritual experience. And I'm sure, I mean, there's nothing wrong, I think, with connecting with like-minded people along
mm-hmm,
the journey. But once it turns into the group think,
mm-hmm,
and individuality and spiritual development is kind of shunned against, like, no, 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 you guys shouldn't do it that way. Everybody should be doing it this way. That
mm-hmm,
never made sense to me. So I'm happy that you had that experience, and I know you are
mm-hmm,
too. And I'm sure you started exactly where you were supposed to start,
mm-hmm,
because that's just how the journey is, and as you
yeah,
continue to grow and add more things, and
mm-hmm,
more, and open up more gifts, then
mm-hmm,
you'll be like, oh yeah, I'm glad I started with that. And
yeah,
for me, that was pretty much the same way too. But
mm-hmm,
like I said, I think I was a little thrown off track with, well, I focused more on the healing side first, which was a lot of what I needed to do because I went through
mm-hmm,
a lot of trauma. So I had to go through a lot of
mm-hmm,
self healing. So everything that I learned on the new age side was still
mm-hmm,
beneficial. They were calling it something, and
mm-hmm,
it's the same thing we was doing. And most of
yeah,
the stuff comes from some sort of indigenous practice anyway,
mm-hmm,
yoga,
mm-hmm,
just because it was mostly people who didn't look like me, they didn't originate that,
mm-hmm,
and so that would be why they could teach a certain amount of it. And when I'm having
mm-hmm.
these experiences, they're like, oh yeah, yeah, we don't know about that part, we just
Mm,
know about hatha.
yeah.
Like, like they like, yeah, we know about, you can't take roots, you know what I'm saying? And so yeah, but I love that. My African spiritual journey, I'm an Aries, so I don't know if that's got something to do with how I just jumped head first into some Ifa, like from a Facebook
Mm,
post. I was like,
mm.
what? And I'm talking about mind blown, like, right away. My ancestors was like, get in there, So,
Yeah.
and I experienced that. And then, I went on to experience a lot of different things with that.
Mhm,
And a lot of different other types of African spirituality, but I was always me going
Mm,
on the journey. And then
mhm,
eventually landed into hoodoo in
mm,
2021 from
mm,
another freaking Facebook post. Like, and that's crazy. And I'll never forget that. This guy was on, it was a group. And I was like, it was, I think it was something about Black women, spiritualist healers,
mhm,
witches, something else. And I just was being
mhm,
nosy and I was coming to check and see what they were doing. And they had all this like candle magic and stuff that they were doing and herbs and all of this stuff. And I was like,
mhm,
wow, like this is pretty interesting. And then he had a video that popped up, and the
mhm.
video was talking about, and it was like he was talking directly to me. And he was like, the
Oh,
problem is you guys aren't reaching out to your ancestors. You're not leaving altars up for them. You're not
mm,
calling on them. You're not giving
mm,
any reverence. And I just felt like it was somebody doing like this to me. And I,
mm,
I was like, oh my God, I got to do this. And I jumped up immediately, started doing my altar. And I went 1 year straight of practicing hoodoo every single day. And that
mm.
got me into the herbal realm. Oh my God. And I was like, there's another realm. I'm like,
Yeah,
I was like, how did I not, why didn't I put that two together? Why in the world would that
yeah.
not be a whole nother spiritual dimension in itself?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
a powerful one too, a
Yes,
quiet but powerful other spiritual dimension
yes.
amongst us. And so I know you're into herbalism as
Mhm.
well. So tell me about your experience with that.
Honestly, that was it's so interesting just like reflecting back on this whole journey because I got involved with that when I had the health crises. So
Mhm.
I remember like really looking for other options, and a friend had like a cousin who had done like a womb wellness practitioner certification or something like that. And so they had me reach out to them. And they gave me like some herbal supplements that they were like could potentially be helpful and things like that. But I remember from there, just out of nowhere, naturally figuring out certain like things to do for like the ailments that I experienced. And it was the wildest thing. Like, I mean, after constantly going to doctors and them just like throwing medicine on top of medicine and things, and the woman being like, yo, like, you gotta stop taking some of this stuff, like it's gonna make it worse. But then also too, I remember I'd gotten like a food sensitivity test and really had to advocate for that because they were like, well, if you do the allergen test, that's not FDA approved and like it's not gonna be covered by insurance. And like
Mhm.
it's, like they were just giving me the runaround with this. And so I ended up coming across a food sensitivity test, and literally everything that I had been eating showed up as some type of food sensitivity. And so I thought it was lying because I'm like, how are you like my whole diet? You telling me this is
Like
not.
Dr. Sebi, here you come.
Yes. I was like,
You're
what
going to
is
have like
going
15
on?
things you can eat.
Yes. I was like, what is this? But I took it to a nurse practitioner, and she was like, she literally given the same test to her daughter because her daughter was like highly sensitive to things. And her response had been to take the test to an allergenist. And allergenist was like, yo, this is tested over 200 something foods. We're not going to test nearly that much. You don't have to get it like the substances injected into your back, which I knew I was just going to have like, a response from anyway. She was like, I would go for this. And so I was like, okay, almost everything on there was like an animal product legitimately. So I first went pescatarian, I remember, and saw like great reaction in my body, like just felt better overall, as well as trying different herbs, like integrating in turmeric, integrating in
Mhm.
oregano oil, and like being like, oh, like this is treating everything that I would have like had inflammatory response with, and like, going to the doctor for and them giving me something that's gonna create even more harm. So the
Yes.
combination of the two of those things, I eventually went down to vegetarian and then went completely vegan. And then from there, just was like, man, like I am exploring all of these different herbal remedies that are just coming naturally to me. Like I'm going to health food stores and they're like, I'm asking generally, but like literally being told, get that. And like literally like hearing
Yes.
my ancestors like and didn't know it at the time, but it's like this is what you're supposed to do. This is how you're supposed to use this. This is how you should mix this. This is how you should do this. Then from there, that led to me actually getting an herbalist certification, which came like a few months before I got COVID. And so literally
Mm.
like the stuff that they were giving me over the counter was making things worse. Like I was feeling like, spine was doing weird things and just feeling terrible. And it was literally my herbal remedies that saved my life. So it's just
Yes.
interesting, like seeing how all of these things have grown and shaped over time. Like when we talk about the ancestors being present with us, they
Yes.
definitely are. And that stuff is really in our DNA.
It
It's something
is.
that you just innately, you know.
You just know.
you know.
And that's it. I love that. And everything's right on time. When we're in tune with that spiritual realm, nothing's off. Everything's
Mm-hmm.
divine timing. As long as we're listening, we can totally
Mm-hmm.
avoid and bypass certain
Mm-hmm.
things. And I love how you talked about when you were in the health food stores and they were like, get this, get that. And that was
Mm-hmm.
literally my journey when I started opening up the herbal realm. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, this is different. I'm like, my freaking kitchen cabinet is a freaking
Yes, you see my
is that
medicine.
powerful. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Where am I going to start? They're like, you start with
Mm-hmm.
what's in your kitchen cabinet. They're like, garlic.
Mm-hmm.
You got garlic, don't you? Cayenne. You got
Yes,
cayenne, black
yes.
pepper. You got, and the duality of how these herbs can be used, also for
Mm-hmm.
medicinal purpose, but also on
Mm-hmm.
the hoodoo side, roots purpose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everything literally was a form of hoodoo.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when hoodoo came about during slavery, and they
Mm-hmm.
everything. And a lot of that stuff was passed down that we still do, and we don't even recognize it that we're doing
Mm-hmm.
things. And most of your heavy hitting hoodooists are in church. That's what I be saying. That's one
Yes.
thing I look at the church and I'm like, my God, that is hoodoo right there. And y'all over here running from it, y'all doing it anyway. Like so, but
Yes.
yeah, I love that. That's how that journey was. And I also talked about how that enhanced my food, like the
Mm-hmm.
taste and the flavor of my food,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
tremendously, because they would be like, put this in there, try that. I'm like, I never cooked with that before. Like, and it would just really set it off. Like, I felt like I'm cooking
Yes.
like a grandmama now. Like,
You ever just ask them like, I don't know how to make this, but show up for me. And the way that them hands get to moving, they be like, shake, shake it a little bit more. Okay, now put it away. Like
yep,
it's crazy the
yes,
experience, man.
I
The
love
love
it.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And I can tell you have that love for your ancestors and they love you too. And they
Hmm.
love your obedience,
Hmm.
despite not knowing what the heck is going on, but you just doing stuff. You like, spirit being led and you going and the body will follow.
Yes.
So, but it's got you where you are today. And I love how you are incorporating that now. So tell me
Hmm.
how, with all that experience, the Reiki, the
Hmm.
herbalism,
Hmm.
ancestral healing, how you were able to come back around with the trauma therapy that you do to incorporate that in.
Yeah. So for me, it looks like predominantly now I focus more on the holistic and alternative and ancestral healing element of stuff. I don't do traditional therapy anymore. So usually my clients have either gone through that already and graduated from it, or they feel like their concerns have been resistant to it. And so then they find me. And so it looks like now I do a lot of holistic coaching and then I integrate in all of those different services into the holistic coaching avenue. And so it works really, really well, especially
Mhm.
for the clients that I see like regularly and, for like probably like a little bit longer amount of time. But some of the things that I've seen my clients be able to accomplish has been amazing. And it's stuff that they wouldn't have been able to really, or that they hadn't seen themselves accomplish already with like traditional therapy. So I love being able to integrate it in that way because our healing modalities have always been holistic. They've
Yes.
always integrated mind, body, and spirit. And so when you're navigating through traditional healing methods, which I mean, I'm not telling anybody, like, go to the doctor, like, get your
Right.
diagnoses, like, then see if
Right.
you can treat it a different way, but take care of yourself. But the separation of those things is often what I'm noticing leads to a lot of harm in our community, especially amongst Black women. So
Yes.
being able to kind of fill in the gap in that way has been something that I really enjoyed, as opposed to having to navigate through a clinical model of everything having to look a certain type of way. And it really depends on the state in which you're licensed too, because certain states just aren't keen on
Yeah.
you including certain things. Like the reason that I had to actually create a whole separate business entity a year before I actually had that health crisis, I went and talked to a couple business lawyers with regard to my therapeutic practice and was like, I really want to integrate in these things. At the time, it would have just been like the coaching element. But I was like, I really feel like there should be something more. I had gotten the coaching certification already. And I was like, I really want to do this. And the lawyers were like, not in this stage, you don't. Like you want to
Yeah.
completely separate everything because the blowback that could potentially come for your license and your business, like it's not a good idea. And so at the
Hmm.
time I remember being like, well, that felt like a lot, trying to run one and launch a completely different one. And so I was like, maybe I just need to put it on the back burner. And I guess I put it on the back burner too long because then a year later I had that crisis. But like you said, divine timing, everything
Yep.
happens how it should. So I'm grateful now to be able to practice in the way that I do and offer services that really center, our concerns.
I love that too. And so you're on the West Coast now. Which state are
Hmm.
you in?
California.
Okay, so you're in Cali. They're a
Hmm.
little more lax, but I know anytime that you're going after traditional
Hmm.
Western anything and you're talking
Hmm.
about, oh, let's do holistic and that, they like, whoa,
Hmm.
wait a minute, that's a threat to
Hmm.
our entire makeup. Okay, we don't know
Hmm.
what you're trying to do. You're gonna pick one or the other. Okay, you're not on the
Uh-huh.
team anymore.
Yes.
But I'm glad you chose, where we're headed anyway as humanity.
Hmm.
I think that people are looking for
Hmm.
results. They are looking for healing. They're looking
Hmm.
for things that are, easily accessible. And, I'm not a therapist at all. And I'm big
Hmm.
on helping women with heal generational trauma. And I have people
Hmm.
all the time that'll say to me, well, you're not a therapist. And I'm like, yeah, I know that.
Hmm.
However, not everybody can afford to go to therapy. That's my thing.
Hmm.
Not everybody
Hmm.
has access to therapy. Not
Hmm.
everybody has access to funds for coaching and stuff like
Hmm.
that, and they still need healing,
Hmm.
particularly our community.
Hmm.
And so I just offer some sort of relief to be able to start some self-healing practices. I always navigate people back to
Hmm.
therapy, if you
Hmm.
have some deeper rooted things,
Hmm.
and you need a safe space to talk to somebody about. I always, encourage that. But at the same time, I won't stop what I'm doing,
Hmm.
um, because I know there's people out there that don't have it. They just don't
Hmm.
have it. They don't have a job where they can afford the therapy.
Hmm.
The insurance won't cover certain things. And
Hmm.
to me, I don't think it's fair that everybody doesn't have access to healing. And that's where the holistic and alternative natural ways that we did this, because I always think about, well, what were they doing before?
Hmm.
That's the thing. Like, you
Hmm.
can't tell me that they didn't have,
Hmm.
somebody to talk to, like back in the
Hmm.
day before there was a thing such as a hospital. They had people, they had
Hmm.
elders, they had, the whole community, the village, they had trusted people to talk to. They had medicine doctor, they had a shaman to go to for their
Hmm.
spiritual need. They had everything they needed,
Hmm.
So for us to act like, oh no, there's only one way to do it, that puts me in that mindset of that kid who was going to that church thing, and then y'all saying we all
Hmm.
got to think this way. I'm like, that doesn't work for me. Like,
Hmm.
and it never
Yeah.
has. So
Hmm.
I'm grateful to see you and other people who are on this podcast that are doing this, and
Hmm.
at the right time, because I think, we're just prepping for humanity that's like, okay, look, enough is enough. I'm ready to heal this pain. And
Yes.
so it's good that you have services like that. So we know you're in the West Coast. Now
Hmm.
tell us how we can find you, as well as if what where we can find you, and if you have any events coming up, and how people can get in touch with you for any sessions.
Yes, so you can find out more information about me at energyalignedhealing.com. I'll also be teaching Reiki classes at a local collective here out in Pacific Beach. So that starts next week. And then also have a healing event going on with Aaron Vereen. So he's an African drummer out here and originally based in LA, but we're coming together, me, him, and Roseanne Vereen. So they're a married couple. They're amazing. And so we'll be coming together in the beginning of January and facilitating a healing event that will include some ancestral healing and some African drumming ceremonies. So those are some of the upcoming things that I have
Love it.
happening.
I love
Um,
it.
yeah. So I'm excited. They're excited. And I think that this is going to be a great opportunity for our communities to be able to, get access to healing in ways that don't necessarily involve one-on-one. So you get to still kind of like be in this space and learn from people as well and, have it be accessible to you. So we're excited about
Yeah,
that.
I love it. And I'll make sure I have all that information down in the description.
Mhm.
Um, this will be actually airing in December. So that's just in time for your January event. And
Mhm.
and I will say this for anybody like just now getting started on their journey. This is how it was for me. I started connecting with
Mhm.
the spiritual community. The spiritual community is an underground community. We out there, we big, and that is your community. You guys
Mhm.
come together to have that like
Mhm.
mind, heart centered space, holding space
Mhm.
for one another, and then everybody separates and goes on their journey. And so you still
Mhm.
get your spirit fed in that way. But it's
Mhm.
definitely a great way to be able to connect with other people and find other teachers and mentors along the way and friends.
Mhm.
And so that you have like minded people along your journey. So we're not completely alone. And it's not,
Mhm.
just the ancestors that you can't see.
No, we value community as I mean, because that's ancestral, right? Having
Yeah.
community. It's just your ancestors want you to be wise with the
Yes.
community in which
That
you
is so
participate
true.
in. That's it.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you once again for joining us today on this podcast episode. I'm sure my audience enjoyed you as much as I did. And I will be sure to have all your information down in the description so that you guys go follow her. If you're on the West Coast, go check out Energy. Is it Energy
Energetically aligned healing. Yep, you were
Energetically
close.
Aligned Healing? I don't know why that was so hard. Energetically Aligned Healing. Let me pronounce it right. Go check her out. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye.